Greetings, comrades, and welcome to the Eastern Border. And oh boy, we have weird news. I wanted to do this for a long time already. I really wanted to get Daniele on the show because he hasn't been for a while, and then also Alex, and we have tons of news which are bad. And I have some questions to you about Tucker Carlson, about interviews, certain interviews that may or may not have happened, about the mood in the States in general, and about China. There's going to be a lot of questions about China and Taiwan.
Yeah, sounds good.
Great. Let's do this.
Glorious. So you all know Navalny has died. It wasn't a good thing, but what also died is one of my, I wouldn't call him a buddy, one of Igor Girkin's buddies. It's a friend of a friend, so to speak. Mr. Murs. He went about criticizing the amount of casualties that Russia suffered in Avdiivka. And then he decided to just be kind of rough about it. And then he was criticized on Solovyov's channel, like by Vladimir Solovyov's associates. And then he decided to shoot himself and wrote a huge letter about all the situation, which I'll just get to you soon. And then Igor Sechin's son, associated with Gazprom, also died from a heart attack, supposedly. Everyone dies from heart attack these days. Except the problem is, imagine this is Gazprom, and this is Gazprom leader's son, who's 35. And what he managed to do is, hard to even say this, he basically forbade FSB or the Russian police to investigate the matter of his son's death, because he said that Gazprom's internal security, which is made from ex-FSB agents, are dealing with all this stuff, and they're investigating. So no need for FSB or police to do that. How many businessmen in the United States can do that? And again, I don't even know how to compare this to anything, because I don't know. Is this feudalism or is this something that is kind of more like ancient Rome and people of the Senate doing things for themselves, basically?
Kind of looks like it that way, where it's like the rules of the game are, I mean, they make perfect sense within that one game. They seem really bizarre and weird and disturbing for anybody who has been raised more in like a Western style democracy or something, because we have this expectation of how, the rules are supposed to be enforced, how everybody's supposed to go by, and so on and so forth. And it clearly, by now it's so obvious that we are not even in the same neighborhood of expectations regarding how free speech or rules are applied or anything like that.
Yeah, and this is one thing. I'm sorry to skip to this, but you just brought this up because this is my viewpoint of Tucker Carlson's interview. To me, it was quite obvious that Tucker Carlson was sent there and paid to just, agree with Putin, be a total psychopath on everything. However, Putin managed to make so little sense that Tucker Carlson got even a bit confused. He tried to be a good psychopath. He just couldn't, but it was just too much. He couldn't grasp anything to agree on this. And I think the good question was about the evidence. Like, if you have all this evidence, then why don't you just bring it out? And I thought at that point, Tucker had been like thinking, okay, I need to agree to something, but how and to what? And he's like gone out already to talk about how everything's cheaper in Russia. Meanwhile, disregarding all the salary differences. But then Tucker Carlson figures everything out and says, it must be some master strategy. Mr. Putin, evidence stuff. And then Putin just disregards him for everything. I don't know. I think the look on Tucker Carlson's face was truly genuine.
Well, I was going to say that's always his look. That's always the face he makes. I mean,
Tucker Carlson expected to be a psychopath, but he was expected to be still a Western psychopath. He needed some facts to agree,
Yeah, there was. Well, I just need to bring up the question that he asked. That was actually a good one that Putin just disregarded. He just dodged it completely. It was where he said, well, if this has been so self-evident, this idea that Ukraine has always been Russia and that you've believed this for so long, why didn't you try to take Ukraine when you took power 24 years ago? And Putin just completely ignored it. And it's actually a really good question. Why didn't he? And the answer is, kind of obvious. But maybe you can provide some insight on that, Kristaps, actually.
Well, because he was put into power as a nobody, out of nowhere guy, and he already had a war on his hands when he stepped into power with Chechnya, who wanted to separate. Talking about Chechnya, yeah, Ramzan Kadyrov and his son, they also do all this nonsense about ignoring laws and being extreme heroes of everything.
Yeah. To go back to your original question, is this feudalism? I would say we've already covered that actually, man. I think it was actually our last conversation where you had me on. I think we were talking about how Russia has indeed sort of, I mean, we could call it regressed. I don't want to use even a judgmental term. I just want to say I think Putin has essentially, whether by instinct or by design, reduced the Russian sort of state of economic normalcy to one of feudalism. Maybe not economic, but just cultural normalcy to one of feudalism. Again, I don't know if that's conscious, if he thinks about it in those terms, but he absolutely does, has created that way of living. There was a Russian economist you were citing who has been saying this for years at this point.
Dmitry Potapenko, yes.
Right, yeah.
I was stunned. Well, again, this Moors guy, he just offed himself. And he wrote a huge letter quoting even Bushido code, the one written in Major Restoration era, which I highly doubt had anything to do with historical stuff. But yeah, he even quoted that. People were angry and confused, but at the same time, Russian propaganda are angry because people have died, and today 100 more died. Russian generals really like to just organize their troops, parade formations, which then get HIMARS. Then that goes in some Russian war bloggers' post from the front lines, who's yelling about the incompetency of the generals, and then draft official propaganda just blasts those people out of nowhere. Today, more people like this died, so it was just yet again weird. No one seems to care about anything at this point. There's they're trying to fake stuff. I would even presume.
What do you mean? No one seems to care, within Russia, or
within Russia? Within Russia.
I didn't know if you meant more broadly, because I was going to say there is the demoralization aspect broadly, but that's a whole other subject.
Yeah, but currently it's definitely in Russia. It just seems that people have decided to just utterly and completely not care about any losses and pretend that everything's going ultra fine. Then they're just gonna try to, make sure everything looks nice until the election or something.
There doesn't seem to be many parallels, in that sense, sort of nihilism there. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't get the sense that, for example, well, okay, it wasn't allowed to be, but the sense that I get is that there was no nihilism like that during the Second World War. That was the quote unquote Great Patriotic War. Now, yeah, I'm sure there were people who didn't care, but they had to pretend to because Stalin would have them shot. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, this seems different, I guess, is what I'm saying, in kind of an obvious way.
Well, at this point, it kind of goes like this: there is nihilism, and then there is whatever people decide to just do at random, almost nihilism in the sense that I don't understand what's going on with the official propaganda at this point, because they are seemingly allowed to do whatever. I mean, it's good for us, but it seems so ridiculous that that they are just yelling at people who are trying their best to actually do something. And now, I'm mentioning this because this guy who shot himself from these Z bloggers, he was there fighting since the very beginning, the very early war of 2014, since the very, very, very early days. So strange that instead of getting any aid or anything, he just got murdered, basically forced to commit suicide. But in his suicide note, it's understandable that he didn't do it by himself, and everything just seems so weird. And with Igor Sech and everything, people are just dying left and right, and we really need a strong leader at this point over here in this area. We need someone to take care of stuff. And now, if you listen to my previous episode, what we got is you in the States want to elect either Biden or Trump, and I don't think either of these are good options. Don't you have anyone younger?
Yeah, I think that's where we're at, where there's the degree of cynicism throughout the world, the degree of most people feeling powerless, because some of the stuff that used to be hidden, some of the stuff where you had to be a little sneakier about playing a gross, corrupt, disgusting game, is now in the open. And despite being in the open, people seem to be completely unable to do anything about it, whether because you have a more authoritarian situation in explicit fashion that if you dissent, you get suicided, like in Russia, or whether it's more just this sense of like there's a whole machine out there that you're not gonna change, that you're not gonna be able to do anything about it, so screw it, forget it. The vibe is the same. I mean, if you think about like the Trump line from 2016, I could shoot somebody in the middle of the street and I wouldn't lose a vote. I think that captures the political reality of the past few years as clearly as it gets. In Trump's case, maybe not literally shoot somebody in the middle of the street, unlike in
I
the
don't know about that.
yeah, but it's getting close. That's why I was actually watching, I saw a few episodes of this show, The Boys, which I thought, the premise was like, oh, it's another superhero show. And then it's clearly not at all, like all the superheroes are for the most part a bunch of assholes and they do terrible things. But the part that's funny about it is that, the whole premise of the show is based on popularity and clicks and Instagram and how the superheroes are like social media stars in a way. And then when dirt pops up, when they mess up, when they do the kind of things that 10 or 15 years ago would have led to the end of somebody's career, when they do that, they actually get even more popular. Like the more they act offline, the more they act in not the way you're supposed to kind of way, the more popular they get. And I mean, the guy who wrote the Boys clearly made it, he based this villain on Trump. But the same thing could be said for a lot of people. And I think, when you say about the choices, okay, sure, that's Trump, but what about the other choices? I think that's where we're at, where they're like Democrats. When's the last time the Democrats had a real candidate? Maybe 2012 with the second Obama. After that, they shoved down everybody's throat Hillary Clinton that nobody liked. Then they went with 2020. There was just the thing of like, well, I mean, I guess we go with Biden because he was with Obama and he's like a million years old and barely makes sense anymore. But hey, at least he's a name associated with somebody liked. And now they are doing the same thing with this guy who's kept together with Scotch tape. And he's like, if Biden were to die tomorrow, there's not a single person who can step up and is even known by anybody, is even recognizable by anybody. And so you essentially have like the walking corpse there as Biden, because if you don't have him, you haven't built a single candidate in over a decade. And it's like, Jesus Christ, this is the opposition to the Trump idea. Is like, so you're stuck. And I think that's the problem. The mainstream feeling is that when you're stuck between terrible choices, and nobody gives you, I mean, clearly some choices are more terrible than others, no doubt, but you're stuck with terrible choices. The general feeling is that people at that point just want entertainment. They want pro wrestling. They want the guy who tells them, I'm going to do this and that, and they can cheer and clap whether they believe it or not, because at least it sounds funny.
Because yeah, that's an important thing to remember, that I think a lot of Biden supporters don't want to admit, even though it's not really any kind of admission of fault. Trump is funny. Like, he is legitimately very funny. That is not a barometer for who should be a leader, though. Like,
That is the thing I asked people around like here what they liked about Trump, and people told me that, well, at least here in Europe, he at least produced the best memes.
yeah,
We enjoyed before any real crisis began. It was really funny to look at, eat some popcorn and look at all the insanity.
right.
It wouldn't be funny now at this point at all.
Yeah, it's like, I don't care if he's funny, if he's trying to, for example, like he says he has said that he could do this, I'm pretty sure, but don't quote me on that. I imagine he would, but I don't care how funny he is when he's trying to mediate a peace between Zelensky and Putin. Like, that doesn't help.
Basically, right now, Russia declared that they're going to go and try to take Kiev.
Oh, okay.
Approximately an hour or so ago. And then also, I'm waiting for Transnistria to do something, because another thing, Putin is not releasing Navalny's dead body. That's also interesting.
I wanted to give you a quick update that maybe you've seen already, because I was just Googling. Navalny's mother has claimed that she, saw the body, and but it sounded pretty unnerving, like what she was saying, that where she said, "They want to take me to the outskirts of the cemetery to a fresh grave and say, 'Here lies your son,'" as if that's like some kind of closure.
I mean, it's obviously not, but just
Yeah.
why is everything so bad? And also, right now, if you want some really interesting stuff that's about to happen, is that we're gonna watch Transnistria. If you remember those guys, I was arrested there.
Right.
Transnistria is now going to oh boy, this is gonna be unfun. They are gonna basically do some sort of thing where they are gonna ask to be integrated into Russia. This is the guys in Moldova, which is also another thing. Of course they are, and then we have Moldova and Romania into all this situation.
What are Moldova and Romania saying or doing? I have not followed that at all.
Well, right now I haven't. I just noticed that they have been basically announced this stuff. So apparently, it was just news on 22nd February. It's all bizarre because again, more stuff to join into Russia. At the same time, I don't know what's going to happen there with Moldova because again, like Romania is a NATO country, so who knows what's going to happen there.
Right.
However,
Yeah.
what really struck Russia at this point is that the Chinese banks, I was surprised about them. Maybe you can explain. Chinese banks that actually decided to follow sanctions, and all of the guys that I follow online into this, on the Russian side, all of my sources, they were just shocked about how well, turns out China is not your best buddy. China decided to follow these sanctions.
Yeah. Well,
It's not working with like Russian banks anymore. Some sort of Chinese banks are not just working at all with Russia or Belarus.
Xi Jinping will do what Xi Jinping wants to do. I mean, he doesn't yeah, he might sign these or make these declarations of friendship with Putin, but I can tell you right now that, and I've actually been talking to my partner's father about this because he's in town and he's been living in China for years at this point. He was hit really hard with what was sort of being called the soft second cultural revolution, where private education was getting shut down across the country. He ran a school, got completely shut down like overnight. I mean, this is why I don't really like calling China communist anymore. They much more resemble National Socialism and fascism in terms of how they operate their economy, which is ostensibly free market until the state says no. But regardless, the self-interest at play within Beijing is they will ally with whoever is the most convenient to their immediate vision, and we don't really know what their immediate or future visions are beyond the most general, but beyond generalizations. Like, for example, which I'm sure you said you wanted to get to Taiwan at a certain point, but I just noticed this because a friend of mine he's an investor type, he messaged me about this, and I'm wondering how this fits in, and maybe somebody's done some analysis on this and I haven't looked into it, but just based on what you just said about how the Chinese have essentially joined in on financial sanctions. China also just yesterday apparently banned major institutional investors from selling stocks at the open or close and plans to track who is shorting. So in a sense, they're kind of going after the people who did the GameStop stonks thing a couple of years back. But they're basically clamping down on the market. And I'm wondering, again, how that fits in with what's happening with their relationship to Russia, and perhaps how this could relate to a future geopolitical move, like, say, trying to take Taiwan. I've heard multiple people, talking about the timeline. Supposedly intelligence here in the United States, I want to say, it might just be like a broader summary, but I've heard that the timeline allows for anywhere from a 2025 to 2027 invasion of Taiwan. But I heard that, I don't know how much I trust him in terms of like current affairs, but I heard Neil Ferguson talking on a podcast recently, the historian Neil Ferguson, who has been advocating for calling our current relationship with China Cold War II for many years now. I heard him saying that an invasion of Taiwan could happen as early as January 2024. Obviously, that didn't happen, but he's making the point that we can't necessarily rely on intelligence timelines because we don't necessarily know what's going on inside Beijing, at least to any reasonable degree. So I don't know. That's a very interesting development, though, what you just listed.
With this, they're trying to be more friendly to the United States and just everyone in general. Maybe, again, this is just weird.
It could be trying to keep us off guard, but that doesn't seem to really make sense because, Xi Jinping is not an idiot. I don't think he is unhinged the way Putin is. Like you've disabused me at least a long time ago of the notion that Putin is some rational actor. He clearly is ideologically possessed, and she does not have that. He has ambition, but that's it.
Latest about all that stuff is that Russian propaganda is obviously blaming guess who?
Biden?
Poland.
Oh, Poland. Oh, yeah.
Poland and the United States of America, because Poland is apparently a mega superpower. Poland and United States. I'm surprised that I haven't seen UK yet in the death of Navalny, because they always go about oh, but it wasn't beneficial to Putin. He didn't benefit. Putin hasn't benefited from anything in this stupid war.
Isn't it a Russian tradition to like be paranoid about Poland at this point?
I don't know.
I mean, that's literally what Stalin was terrified of, was encirclement by Poland and Japan and by extension Germany. So I'm just wondering, and that obviously was not an issue ultimately, but yeah.
Proud tradition, be afraid of. I don't. That again brings me back to Tucker Carlson's speech, which was. How do you blame Poland for starting World War II, where you invaded?
It's like Putin just pretended Molotov-Ribbentrop, like the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact didn't exist, I guess. I don't know.
Putin's speech was if any of you wanted to do something about, I don't know, some modern day issue, but then decided to make we'll start a new podcast about it and start with the very beginning.
Well, I got to give Putin credit. He seems to have completely abandoned the denazification rhetoric that he was starting out with. He's just abandoned that and saying outright what he was already saying in his Russian speeches to Tucker, where he was just giving his 45-minute historical monologue. I like to jokingly say that Putin is a history brain. He's one of those examples of a smart guy who reads lots of history and then takes all the wrong conclusions because he's so smart that he's able to talk himself into conspiratorial positions.
But he couldn't even put three. I'm not even talking about how all the historical mistakes that he made. He couldn't even put three sentences together. He physically could not do that.
I couldn't. I mean, I wonder how much you could pick up on that with the English translation. I mean, you actually. Well, did you hear a version without the dubbing? Because I only heard the dubbing version.
Obviously, I had to comment on this, but I've read the transcript and all the Russian stuff. He was exactly he wasn't doing anything very smart anyways. He made tons of mistakes, and then he couldn't stuff sentences together. And then we had his spin doctors presenting this as some sort of explanation towards the West about how trying to twist this into look, Western people don't care about history, but they should, and they should learn history before they are messing into our own affairs, which is the war with Ukraine. Which basically means that you guys obviously are proving Putin wrong by educating people about history. So I congratulate you for that, at least.
Well, sure, but I have to give the propaganda credit. They're not wrong that Americans don't care about history. More do than none, and I'm happy about that. But
why then even talk about?
Well, so. I am of two minds on this. I'm very optimistic, actually, about content creation in the West being an avenue towards greater historical knowledge. And I want to hear Daniele's thoughts on this, too. But I just finished putting together, and I think it's coming out tomorrow, an interview I did. It was more of a conversation with a longtime collaborator or a friend of the show, I guess we could say. Not a collaborator, because he does his own thing. My friend JD Hewitt of the History Underground on YouTube. And it's a very successful channel where he does sort of historical travel, not travelogues, but educational sort of presentations of actual historical locations. And he just passed 600,000 subscribers. Now, that's global, but still, I think that there is an appetite for it. But we talked about something very disturbing, this trend. Kind of started about 3 years ago. We started talking about, he and I had a conversation about this, and we kind of predicted that it would turn into something worse. And what we're talking about is the drop in knowledge about even what the Holocaust is. And it has gone from back in 2018, a poll was taken, and something around 2/3 of millennials and Gen Z did not know what Auschwitz was. Now, Auschwitz is well known, but it's still kind of specific. Then a couple years later, knowledge of the Holocaust in general dropped down by a fair bit and was getting close to 50 to 60% of young people not knowing what it was. And then finally, after obviously the incentive of October 7th and the horrendous reaction towards it from people who were standing for Hamas, then there was another poll done conducted by YouGov that was reported by The Economist in December of 2023 that showed 20% of Gen Z and younger millennials think the Holocaust is a myth. 20%. That's millions and millions of people. It's insane. And there's a lot of reasons for it. And JD and I, we talked about that. And so people can listen to that when it comes out tomorrow. My point is just that I think that the issue of being interested in history is definitely one of education, but I don't think it's necessarily a good thing that more people are interested, because a lot of them are obviously taking the wrong lessons away from it, because a lot of them are getting their information from social media. The ones who are getting their information from podcasters and documentarians and writers, that's great. I love that. But the fact that we had social trends being built around things like Holocaust denial and claiming that you've read the Osama bin Laden letter to America and been blown away by it, when most people probably didn't actually read it. Like, my point is just that I don't think that Americans are very educated about history, and if they are, a lot of them are educated in the wrong way.
I also blame TikTok, because TikTok is an absolute cancer to the brain.
Yeah, it's TikTok, yeah.
Because everywhere else you can at least choose what you watch. Meanwhile, on TikTok, you just once you get down your bubble with weird influencer people who have strange opinions, such as at one point there was this lady seriously stating that ancient Rome does not exist.
Daniele, what do you think about that?
Bullshit. It's like, along with birds are not real, ancient Rome didn't exist. It's all, I'm glad I'm living at this time, because I'm discovering the real truth about history and life.
At this point, with some of the stuff that I've seen on TikTok, even Graham Hancock's craziest theories sound more plausible and sensible than some of that stuff that's out there. Again, it's more about critical reasoning skills and media analysis and being able to use your analytical brain to get some wisdom, maybe somehow. I don't know.
I want to have I want to white pill myself here a little bit, hopefully, but maybe it'll just make things worse. I want to hear, Daniele, what you think about the whole state of historical education in the United States now that we're talking about it. Because you're actually in the trenches, you're teaching this stuff. I'm just, I'm in school, but I'm learning it. But yeah.
Which is why I am mentioning, because you're in school and you are teaching. So please go on.
Yeah. Daniele, please help me not feel horrible.
I won't. Sorry about that. No, I think it's like, even when you talk about, there are trends that are on one level huge, right? You look at somebody like Dan Carlin has 4 million listeners or something like that, or even your friend on YouTube with hundreds of thousands. It's like, whoa, there are a lot of people who are very interested. Sure. But now look at the total population of a country like United States. You're talking about such a tiny fraction anyway. Like, how many people take Carlin, take every single YouTube channel that's out there, take people who read the history books, take all of that. What does it all add up to? Maybe optimistically 10% of the country, 15 maybe? Which is, don't get me wrong, those are big numbers in a country of 300 plus million. But that still means that 8 to 9 out of 10 of the people you run into are not going to have any interest or knowledge or care for any of that stuff. So while those numbers are big and they do represent a trend, when you compare them to the numbers of actual people out there, it's more or less than nothing, And you see that, never mind that, as you say, even among the ones who are consuming content, doesn't mean they are necessarily consuming high quality content, or you can even tell the difference between high quality content and poor content. The level of education in US is, I don't know why, it's something I never understood, but throughout grade school in particular, it's abysmally bad. I mean, it's like my daughter was showing me, she's now 14 years old, she started high school. Not once did they ever open a map in any of her classes to show her where different countries are. She only knows that because we played a game at home where we pull out an atlas and with a blank map and go okay, which country is this one? Which one? But in the class, she has kids, and not dumb kids either. She has kids who would ask, what was the latest one? Is China part of Asia, or is it its own continent, or what is it?
Don't you guys have geography as a class in school?
The last time I took a geography class was 7th grade. I'm not kidding.
And I think they got rid of it after that. Because I don't right now.
Yeah, in a lot of cases.
Nobody
does geography. I am actually stunned by this.
Yeah, and I mean, so of course people then don't know where anything is, don't know what people in such and such a country, what the culture is like, or the history is like, or any of that stuff. Because none of that is, you're never really exposed to any of that stuff. Like, I'm talking even about smart kids. They just, unless at home they are exposed to it, they're never really exposed.
I want to yes and you there, because I was going to say I'd like to think I'm well informed about a lot of parts of the world, but I am like I just implied it by saying I haven't taken it since 7th grade. I do not know where things are in my head. I have to actually look it up on a map.
I was lucky that I suppose I was lucky then because I had to, during my 9th grade, we had geography up to 9th grade, and then we had to do a test. And after that, because I was in humanities class in high school, then obviously we stared at maps all constantly because it was just there in the background.
And that just geography is just an example, honestly. It's a huge example because, if you don't know where anything is a kind of a problem. But like when it comes to history, it's the same thing. When it comes to, the average level of knowledge about pretty much anything is less than nothing. And I don't think this is just a US thing. I think there are some places where the level is a little higher, some places where it's lower. US is particularly low, or particularly in a Western country. That's kind of where we're at, which then it's not exactly surprising that then you are at a place where the reaction to things that should be automatic disqualifiers. I mean, if you think about like the other day, for example, earlier you mentioned, Kristaps, you mentioned NATO. You think about a few days ago when Trump was like, oh, if NATO members don't pay their fair share, I'm going to encourage Russia to attack them. Just like that. That should be the end of somebody's political career. They could have had a spectacular, they could have never said anything stupid in their life. They could have had a spectacular career. They say one thing like that, and everybody goes like, whoa, this guy is fucking insane and he's dangerous. And okay, they should be now at 0.3 in the polls and nobody would ever consider voting for them. The fact that we're in a place where somebody can say something like that and doesn't lose 0.1 of his vote is the famous I could shoot somebody in the middle of the street and not lose a vote. This is the equivalent of it. When you're at that stage, I don't know what conclusions you draw from it, but they are certainly not good.
No, and I didn't actually know about that quote, which, yeah, but the thing is, the thing with Trump and his like boisterous claims, we'll call them, that's being very charitable. When he says things like that, I just don't believe him anymore, because I do look at things that he said back in 2016, like in terms of like stuff that could have been turned into actionable policy. The most extreme things he said, I'm going to build a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it, is a good one. I'm pretty sure the Biden administration has built more of that wall than the Trump administration did, for example. The closest thing to keeping a promise that he did was his so-called Muslim ban, which I don't even really...
Someone is still building that wall or something? Is it actually happening?
Yeah, well, I'm not fully versed on the border. I just know that it's because it is a legitimate crisis, it doesn't really matter who is president. There's going to be stuff done about it, and people are going to debate, how good or bad it is, and everyone's just going to blame each other depending on who's in power. But my point is just that when I hear Trump say those things, I don't take them seriously, and that's kind of made me sanguine about him. But I can understand, especially if you're someone living in the Baltics or in Europe in general. You hear that and you're like, what the fuck are Americans doing?
One, wall is weird. Two, about Trump. In any case, every country that borders Russia does pay their dues. We all do. Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Finland, Poland. Yeah, we all do that. And then Romania down on the other side, they also do that.
I think what that signifies then, that complete lack of awareness, is that he doesn't care. He's just saying something that he knows will drive his opponents crazy, because I'm sure it did. I didn't even know about this quote, but I guarantee you within one Google search, at least 5 of the top 10 results will probably be some op-ed from some, like establishment shill just panicking about it and being like, this is the worst thing in the world. And I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying that the predictability of our news cycle has become kind of boring at this point. Instead of being funny, it's just boring. I know exactly how his opponents are going to react whenever he says some dumb shit. And I know exactly how his supporters are going to react, which is laughing at the hysterical reactions of his opponents. Like that's all it is now. That is what our political system is. And I don't know if the system itself is going to change. The only silver lining, by the way, that I can throw out there, another reason I'm kind of sanguine, is we kind of have been talking about how Joe Biden is old as hell. Not, even though he's obviously way sharper mentally, Trump is old as hell too, and he can't run a third time. I mean, the ability for him to run a third time, if he even won this time, it would require like a complete, there would have to be a constitutional amendment to overturn whichever amendment it is that keeps it at 2 terms. I can't remember my amendments. Like there's so much that would have to be done. Yes, I know there's people who are probably like, oh, well, what if he, institutes a coup or gains control of the military? Okay, fine. We'll worry about that later. My point is just that these are old people. They're not really that much of a threat because of time.
Hello there, and thanks for listening to another episode of The Eastern Border. Dear Patreons, thank you more than ever for supporting our show. Your donations are crucial to keep us going, and right now all of your money is going to securing good information for you and to fund Kristev's actual real-life mission to Ukraine to report to you live about the war that is going on there. Also, we would like to use this opportunity to urge you to donate to other organizations that are helping people escape Ukraine safely and to defend the country for those who decide to stay on the ground. One such organization we would like to highlight is the Defending Ukraine Together Come Back Alive movement. Launched in 2014, the Come Back Alive became the biggest organization providing support to the armed forces of Ukraine. You can donate directly from their webpage, comebackalive.in.ua. Remember that no donation is too small. In this situation, every dollar matters, every cent matters. If you're uncomfortable with giving money to war, they do have a position on their website that they are providing Ukrainian army with laptops, lights, photo equipment, cables, and is not purely military. Perhaps that might change your mind, but remember you can also donate to strictly humanitarian organizations such as the Red Cross and others that are helping people escape Ukraine safely. Please also keep following us on social media for all of your latest updates on Eastern Border on places like Twitter and Facebook. Keep listening, keep yourself informed. That's all from me now. See you online.
This is another reason, by the way, why Putin killed Navalny, because one of the main Navalny's points was the fact that eventually Putin would be dead and Navalny would not be dead, and then, to remedy that issue, right? But it's just that weird that these two guys, and I mean, in the last election in 2020, they already broke the record for being like the oldest candidates to be the United States presidents ever, and now they're breaking their own record again.
I was gonna say that was I saw when Jon Stewart came back to do the Daily Show, and I've seen a lot of debate about how much value Jon Stewart and his political commentary has been over the years. I still found his rant about them being really old entertaining as hell, because he said they broke the record. You know who previously held the record? They held the record. They broke their own record. Which is just wild. And I think the good news is we're not going to get people that old next time, or maybe we will. I don't know. But the alternatives, well, who do we have?
But I don't know I don't know how much of a good news that is, in the sense that it's like, okay, yeah, you don't get these guys, great. Now you're getting DeSantis and Kamala Harris. It's like, Jesus Christ. You know what I mean? It's like,
Okay, I don't know. Can I get a short explanation on any of these people that you just mentioned that I have no idea about?
Well, Kamala Harris is the vice president, and she is the most notoriously unpopular vice president we've had in a long time.
Question one: Has she actually done anything that I would know about here in Europe?
I don't know, Daniele. What do you think?
probably not.
Yeah, probably not. Like she was the person who, well, I don't know if it was her idea, but they used her to go down to the border shortly after, they were inaugurated into office to solve the border crisis by making a speech just saying, don't come. I mean, that was the most international facing thing she did, I think, but I can't think of anything else. I'm sure people could correct me on that. But yeah, she's not. Vice president's kind of a useless position, honestly, except when it's actually possible that the president could die or retire or die of natural causes or retire because of his age within, the near future. So that's what makes her the most relevant. And Ron DeSantis, he's the governor of Florida. He was for a while the front-running challenger to Donald Trump for the Republican ticket. And that was because I think a lot of people loved his COVID policies, which turned out not to be as bad just in hindsight, but in the moment you can't really be praising someone for taking chances during a pandemic necessarily, but he just ended up screwing himself in all sorts of ways that I will let his, detractors explain if they really want to. But yeah, he's kind of fallen off too. At this point, the only other person running for president from the Republican side is this woman named Nikki Haley.
I have Russian opposition journalists say good things about her. She's the favorite would-be candidate among quite a lot of Russian opposition, by the way.
Interesting. Well, she's been pretty hawkish in things she said. I mean, to her credit, she was the person who at the beginning of the primaries did make a comment about how if we ran Trump and Biden against each other, they're really old. And I give her credit for, saying the quiet part out loud. I don't know if she was the first person to do it, and then like the only other person who doesn't have a shot at winning, but has a shot at really messing with the system that we have. And I only support this because I'm sick of us only having two parties, is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. What little I know about him is that he is like extremely authoritarian when it comes to climate change. Like he has said in the past that people who are skeptical of climate change should be thrown in prison. And yet for some reason, libertarians love him because he hated COVID restrictions. And he's, as far as I can tell, he's an anti-vaxxer. I don't know. I mean, and he has a really weird voice but he's also 70. So, I mean, like the age thing isn't solved there, but the point is he's very popular. He
says 70 by this point, 70 is basically 70 is the new 50 or something.
At this point in American politics. Yeah, exactly. No, he's popular-ish. He's probably the most popular third-party candidate we've had since Ross Perot. I fantasize about having a 1912 election again where you actually have four candidates, where Eugene Debs won like 4% of the vote. He got over 1 million votes in 1912, or that was actually in 1920, and he ran from prison. And that was actually the interesting sort of precedent, because people are talking about Trump's legal troubles. I think there's people who actually believe he couldn't run for president from prison, but as far as unless other laws have been implemented on the books, he could run and ostensibly win, even if he's imprisoned. So I don't know. It's never happened.
But how? Wait, what?
Let me just put it this. I'm kind of going all over the place here, but I want to at least let European listeners know that, at least in my opinion, I think it's almost certain that by the end of 2024, the beginning of 2025, America is going to go through its biggest constitutional crisis in generations. Like, we're going to have a problem. And I think regardless of who wins, you guys should just brace yourselves for that, because that's just going to stop everything. I'm not going to go so far as to say we're going to have a civil war, because I think that's crazy. We're not divided in the same way we were in the 1860s, but I think we're going to have some major political upheavals in the next 12 months, I'll say.
You think so? Okay. Please do explain.
Well, because Trump has already said, and I'm sorry to, just be talking so much here. I want to hear Daniele's take on this too, but Trump has already said, and he already has, at least in the last election, that he would not accept the result of a loss. And because of how he reacted to the 2020 election, there's every reason to believe that unless it's a complete obvious landslide, he is not going to accept the loss. And even if it was a landslide, I'm sure he would find a way to stomp his feet and hold his breath, like he is known to do. The numbers so far seem to suggest that it's going to be a close race. And because he's not going to accept the result, that's already a problem. I have no idea if Joe Biden would accept the result. I can't assume anything about him because I don't even know if he knows where he is right now. I would guarantee you he has people on his team and in his White House who would say the same thing because of what's at stake, quote unquote, because people in Biden world seem to think that if Donald Trump becomes president, he's the next Mussolini, which he had every opportunity to be the next Mussolini during COVID and he didn't take it. So I'm kind of skeptical of that. But regardless, having even just one candidate not accept the result of an election, it already got bad enough after 2020. It's going to get worse after this. People are just not going to tolerate it who are passionately following both candidates. Now, the one area where I could be wrong is I could be misdiagnosing the atmosphere. People might not want there to be a constitutional crisis, so they'll just be like not that passionate and they'll just accept the result. Like, I can envision it being a close result, Trump saying, I won, I actually won, and Biden actually won. And then like just people not turning out the way they did on January 6th, 2021. People are just sick of it. They're just like, can we just get on with it? You know, I can see that happening, but I don't think so. I really think that we are in for a constitutional crisis.
That's a nice thing to have, because apparently there was this publication project just released a thing. They basically analyzed Putin's reign, so to speak. And during the last 6 years, Putin's rule, just the last 6 years, 5,613 people were repressed under criminal articles for criticizing the authorities. That's the data. For comparison, under Khrushchev, from 56 to 61, 4,883 people were repressed. And under Brezhnev, just about 1,000. Basically, what has happened is that in 6 years, Putin has very nearly matched the total repressions of Brezhnev and Khrushchev put together.
What about Stalin? Not quite there.
No, he got not quite there yet. But yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Eastern Border Show. If you have any questions or comments, go to our website, theeasternborder.lv, and leave a comment there. Or email us at theeasternborder@gmail.com. We'll be sure to answer. You can also follow us on social media and contact us there. If you enjoyed this episode, then leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and tell your friends about us. It really helps us grow the show. And remember, happiness is mandatory.